Hello and welcome to the Westerville City Schools podcast, We Are the Ville. This podcast will take you behind the scenes of Westerville City Schools and show you the ins and outs of how our school operates and the great kids we have. I'm your host, Melanie Amato. Today we are continuing to learn the history of Westerville City School District and how the students we have in the classroom today have always had a seat in our district. In our last episode, we talked about growth, and we built 9 schools in 11 years. The kickoff to that growth was the annexation of Blendon Township. Please welcome back Chief Personnel and Policy Officer Scott Reeves. Hey, Scott.
Hey, Melanie. How you doing?
I'm great. And also joining us today is our special guest, Dr. Nancy Nestor-Baker, former school board member who led our district and went to school in our district all during this time. So, welcome, Nancy.
Well, I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you. So we left off last episode about Mifflin Township. Mm-hmm. So get into that for me.
Yeah, and you talked about growth. A couple of things happened at that same time. We took over, as you said, Blendon Township, all absorbed into Westerville Schools. Mm-hmm. You're talking about a very large area, and that kickstarted our growth. The boundaries of Blendon Township that we officially took in 1955 is Blendon Township is 6 square miles that go from Cleveland Avenue and Morse Road to Hamilton Road and Morse Road, all the way up just shy of Big Walnut. Not quite, maybe just past Freeman or right around Freeman is about where Blendon. So all of that territory. So people sometimes ask, why do we go all the way to Morse Road? Well, officially we did in 1955, but back then, Nancy, it was farmland, undeveloped land, very sparsely populated. The city of Columbus was nowhere nearby. The closest high school from Columbus to us was 1955, it was Linda McKinley High School. And so that kick-started our growth. The second thing that was critical to understand in 1955 when that happened was, up to that point, boundary transfers was the Wild West. You could be at Mifflin Township Schools this year, Blendon Township Schools this year, maybe a remote Columbus school, go to New Albany or somewhere like that. And so in 1955, the State Board of Education was created in our Constitution. Now, mind you, we've been a state since 1803. Mm-hmm. We didn't have a State Board of Education until 1955. One of their responsibilities was to control and approve any school boundary changes and annexations. Where before it was automatic and unregulated, now it was very much controlled. And so you fast forward to our period of growth that we talked about in all the schools in the last episode we built. Well, by the time we get into the late 1960s, Mifflin Township, like Genoa, like Sharon, like Blendon, had their own school system. By the time you get to the late 1960s, half of Mifflin Township was in Columbus schools. And they serviced basically what was the eastern part of Linden. The easternmost part was Gahanna. The city of Gahanna is mostly in Mifflin Township and their school district, which they eventually merged with Jefferson Township. And but there was a vast part in the north central part that was controlled by Mifflin Township schools, and they basically went financially insolvent. And like all the other townships, needed to absorb into another school district. Well, you had Columbus Schools was the biggest target. And so the State Board of Education approached the Columbus City Schools to absorb Mifflin. Gahanna was not capable of absorbing Mifflin Township schools. They were probably smaller than Mifflin Township. And Mifflin Township had about 4,000 kids, a few buildings. It was mostly impoverished. It was a very diverse area. Mm-hmm. But Columbus just wasn't going to take it for free. They wanted some territory for it. I would imagine that's a good business deal, Nancy. You wouldn't have taken a bankrupt, dilapidated buildings, 4,500 kids for free.
No, you want something in exchange to make it worth your time, worth your effort.
That's right. And so Columbus made a pitch. The state board initially said no to what Columbus wanted. Because what had began happening since 1965 is as the city of Columbus grew, Columbus Public Schools wanted to grow with them, but the State Board of Education denied their annexation request. So you started to get a separation between where the city of Columbus was and where Columbus Public Schools was. Well, Columbus Public Schools, when you come from Mifflin, well, they wanted some of that back. Remember those territories we wanted to grow into? As they began to grow, the hot spot in the area was Morse Road, right about the time we took Blendon Township. And in the late 50s, early 60s, you had the building of, I don't know if you remember, you're probably a little girl, the building of Northland Mall.
Yes, I do remember.
Yeah.
I was a little girl, yes.
But Morse Road was the hot economic growth corridor. The next one up was 161. And the city of Columbus and Columbus Schools had their eyes on that. They had their eyes on territories on the northwest side around Route 33 that was very rich in industrial commercial land, and they wanted that. And the state board initially said no. Columbus said, good luck. We're out. We're not taking them. They were so desperate to get Mifflin off their hands that they capitulated and allowed Columbus to take and annex the territory they wanted. That meant that there were kids in Grandview, kids in Dublin, kids in Southwestern City, and kids in Westerville that would be annexed into Columbus schools. And they sued to stop it.
Okay. So, Nancy, tell me what your reflection was during this time. So,
Well, I didn't have, as a teenager at that time when that last big land grab happened from Columbus City Schools, I was not aware of much more than the fact that a number of my friends were not going to be part of Westerville Schools any longer. And I didn't understand that. But it was a huge emotional issue for families, for students, for staff as well, as we looked at the carving out of, really, if you think about it, when you talk about square miles, more than 10% of our district in Blendon Township, that's more than 10% of the 52 square miles that we have. And a big chunk of that then, as we move over into Sharon, we were going to lose all of that. We were looking at a massive remaking of the Westerville School District. And it shaped who we are. It caused great pain for families who had intended to have their children go to Westerville schools, who felt they belonged to Westerville City Schools and felt that they were bargaining chips in a game they didn't want to play.
So you had the Northgate area that was the new, it's kind of like what the Genoa, the lakes and all of that is today. That's what the Northgate area between 161 and Schrock Road, between Cleveland Avenue and Carl Road, the Beechcroft area, that was all Westerville schools. That's who was suing. That's what we got in 49 when all of the eastern part of Sharon Township came. New subdivisions, families, and we built a lot of these schools that we talked about in the last episode for these families. We built Annhurst. We built another junior high school in Blendon to accommodate all of these families. And here's the cruel irony. The state board in 1971 approved the annex. They sued, which stopped the annexation until the legal challenges were complete. They weren't complete until the bicentennial summer of 1976. And in 1976, the State Board of Education in the spring said the state Supreme Court said the state board was in their rights to transfer boundaries, and we lost 2,500 kids left the spring as Westerville Schools kids and started in the fall as Columbus Public Schools kids.
So everybody always talks about that, we bus kids in from Columbus and et cetera, but really it's the other way around.
Yeah.
Columbus took kids from us. Two things. Columbus took kids from us, 2,500. Now you have to remember, in the spring of 1976, our second high school just finished its first year because we were so overcrowded. Nancy, I love how she tells how crowded what is now Westerville South was just to be prior to the opening of Westerville North. And now we lost 25% of our student population just like that. The only kids that could stay were seniors in high school. So you could have a family in the Northgate area around Schrock Road, Beechcroft, who had a child who was a senior at Westerville South High School or Westerville North, whatever that was bounded.
Yep.
And a middle school age kid go to Beechcroft Junior Senior.
In a totally different district.
In a total different district. And the double slap in the face to those families who built their houses there to go to Westerville schools is that the entire time it was going through the court system, Columbus Schools was building Beechcroft High School. Beechcroft High School opened in 76, which meant it started construction in at least 74. When it was still a Westerville neighborhood, Beechcroft High School, Northgate Elementary, Avalon Elementary were being built while they were still Westerville. The second slap in the face is that, okay, Columbus Schools built Beechcroft for Westerville families. They built Avalon Elementary School for Westerville families. They built Northgate Elementary School. Well, while all of that was happening, Columbus Schools was in the mire of a desegregation lawsuit where the remedy was citywide busing for desegregation, which meant not only did the kids in Northgate no longer able to go to Westerville schools, they couldn't even go to Beechcroft.
Yeah.
They were bused to Linden. They were bused to Mifflin. And it was a nightmare. And Nancy, you lived it as a student.
It was awful for those families. It was utterly, well, I want to say discombobulating. That doesn't give it enough. It was a betrayal. They felt betrayed by their government, betrayed by the State Board of Education. They didn't understand why they were being used in this way. And we can look at it and we can understand Columbus's perspective that they wanted to do that. But as we look at the way all of that was playing out, with the deseg that was going on, and the building of those schools, and the promises that were made to families, well, you're going to go to Beechcroft, you're going to go to Avalon. No, they were not.
Yeah.
And they knew it. They knew they were being, sold a bill of goods, quite frankly. So it was very, very upsetting. It was very upsetting within the district as we contemplated losing all those families who were part of us. But Melanie, you were talking about people saying that, Westerville had bussed people in from Columbus, and you mentioned that it was the other way around. It's absolutely the other way around. What we saw over time, from the time this district was created, the nibbling away of our township areas. By the city, as the kids that had belonged to Westerville, their families moved here or had been here for generations, believing they were part of a certain area, and they were gobbled up as the city of Columbus expanded. And that's understandable because, when we're talking about the Sharon Woods area, and we're talking about that whole Northgate, Avalon, Beechcroft
Columbus
area.
Square Bowling, Columbus Square Palace.
Right.
Columbus
all of that area.
Mm-hmm.
It was called the Golden Triangle. As we looked at 161, the Morse Road area, it was tax rich. It was great commercial. It was great family tax. It was exactly what Columbus needed at that time because Columbus had its own financial problems that it was dealing with. So from a 50,000 feet kind of perspective, I totally understand Columbus's need and desire to do that, especially since they were taking in an unsolvent district. But for us, for our families, and for the families in the other districts that were affected, it was a betrayal of everything that they believed they had worked for.
And it was, by far, Columbus was, I talked about the other districts, Dublin lost like 200 kids to Columbus schools. Southwestern lost 100, 150 kids or so. Grandview lost like 2 kids. We lost 2,500 kids, and Columbus built schools for them. When they took that territory, they built a high school, Centennial High School out there. They built a new Mifflin High School when they took over Mifflin Township. And you couple that with busing for desegregation, and busing went both ways. It wasn't just taking black kids from the core of the city out to fringe Columbus public schools, mostly white, neighborhoods to balance the racial. It was taking white kids from majority white neighborhoods and busing them into places like East High School, Linden McKinley High School, Mifflin High School. So it was a two-way street, and it was devastating. And the Board of Education of Columbus in one part to rectify, as Nancy said, some of the financial issues that Columbus, especially on the heels of losing the desegregation case, they wanted all of the city of Columbus. Mm-hmm. Columbus annexed into the city of Columbus, annexed into Blendon Township. Columbus, the city, came into our space. That didn't mean Columbus Schools did. Columbus Schools had never been in our space. The city of Columbus ate away at Blendon Township to come into our space.
And that is one of the biggest myths that we have dealt with in this school district, which is that Westerville somehow acquired students that had at one time belonged to Columbus City Schools. That is utterly false. It has no basis in fact. So when we look at the things that are said, send those children back. That is, it's a ghastly statement to me, having lived through the win-win years. It's a ghastly statement on a lot of levels. But send those children back. No, those children, they live on land that has been Westerville Schools. It was never Columbus City Schools.
And farm
land.
families since the 19th century who've been sending kids in Minerva Park, who took the trolley, took transportation south of 161 since 1923, 24. Genoa Township kids outside of Westerville. See, we always equate the southern part as not in Westerville. Genoa Township wasn't Westerville, still isn't Westerville once you cross Maxtown.
Right.
It's Genoa Township. And so we've had kids from multiple places for over a century and a half come to Westerville Schools.
So we lost those kids, about 2,500 kids at that time.
Yes.
Did we also close a school at that time?
Yes, and so we talked a little bit, we've alluded to Minerva Park Elementary School on Cleveland Avenue. That was a school that was built jointly by Blendon Township and Sharon Township schools because those kids lived too far from Westerville and too far from Worthington. Let's give them a school. It ended up being a part of the Sharon Township that we acquired in 1949, was a Westerville school. And when we lost that territory in 1976, Cleveland Avenue was the border. The school was on the Sharon Township side of Cleveland Avenue. That went to Columbus Schools. Westerville closed it and sold it. And there are people by the hundreds who drive by the former Minerva Park Elementary School every day and don't know it.
Are you going to tell us what that is now?
Because it is, I don't know the name of the church, but it's a part.
It is part of a church, now.
On Cleveland Avenue. And if you look at it,
you can tell.
You're like, it's right when you come out of Minerva Park. And actually, if you leave and drive by the lake and the city or the village hall and the police station and work your way to Cleveland Avenue, you see it sitting up there. What was Minerva Park Elementary School as you work your way to Cleveland. Now, it's actually pretty impressive going that way.
It was.
Yeah.
And my family moved into Minerva Park in 1969. So that's the area of town that, my roots really go deeply into. And yes, when you drove out of Minerva Lake Road, that's what you saw, that school. And it was a real point of pride in that community.
Yeah.
And we sold it.
Had no choice.
It was no longer ours. Columbus Schools didn't want it. Directly behind, they built Avalon Elementary School.
So it took us another 13 years then to build another school. And what school was that?
Well, when we lost 25% of our population, we were no longer overcrowded.
Right.
And we had tremendous post-traumatic stress disorder from that experience. So we didn't need another school because we had 25% of our school walk out the door. But this, as a city and as a metropolitan area, Columbus continued to thrive, coupled with, because of the busing situation, you had at first a massive amount of white families leave Columbus Public Schools, who in its height had 110,000 kids. When I started kindergarten in Columbus, they had 110,000 kids. families flooded into.
And just as a reference, Westerville City Schools right now has 14,500 kids.
Yes.
And so you can imagine our district of 3 high schools, 5 middle schools, 15 elementaries is not even comparable to 110,000.
So, kind of the residual of that is you had board members for Columbus schools actively campaigning to acquire all of the city of Columbus for Columbus schools. They had gotten to the point that 30 or 40% of the kids who lived in the city of Columbus did not go to Columbus schools because the city of Columbus had grown into suburban land.
Got it.
But demographically, those 30 or 40% of the kids that did not go to Columbus schools who lived in Columbus, at that point in the late 70s were almost all white. So the Columbus Board of Education said, this is a metropolitan desegregation thing we're looking at. And so they threatened to do all of that. You had families in new subdivisions like Strawberry Farms and other places said, please protect us. Our state rep at the time was the largest, loudest champion to protect the suburban boundaries from Columbus Public Schools, and that was John Kasich, who ended up becoming our governor at one point. And so you had all of this boundary chaos. You had busing start in Columbus in 1979, and you had board members from Columbus threatening to go after all of Columbus. The State Board of Education in 1980 said, nobody can move. We are putting a moratorium on all boundary annexation for this biennium. And they re-upped it again in 1982. They re-upped it again in 1984. And when 1986 came around, the state legislature said, we can't keep doing this. And this is not a statewide problem. This is a Central Ohio problem. This problem doesn't exist in Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Dayton. And they admonished all of the suburban superintendents and the superintendent of Columbus schools, and they brought in a federal mediator, and they said, you will go to a room in the Ohio State University and you will not come out till you have a boundary agreement. And the win-win agreement is what they came out with.
And that's where we will start our next episode. So most people have heard about the win-win agreement, and a lot of people think it's still in play today. But is it really? We'll find out. Scott, thank you as always for joining us. Nancy,
Absolutely.
Thank you. And we hope to get you back for the next episode.
Glad to be here.
Awesome. Thank you.